Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So, just a quick recap of what we did in the last session. So, last session we started off with your Docker file. Now, at any point, if you want to build your own custom images, we make use of your Docker file. So, with this, essentially, what we have to do is we have to create a file with the name Docker file. So, you have to make sure that you're following that naming convention, and post that you can start defining all the instructions. So we discussed about some of the instructions that we have in your Docker file. So we looked at your from instruction, we looked at your ARG instruction. So from instruction can be used whenever you want to define the base image. Okay, so whenever sorry, you want to set your base image. So so generally, whenever what happens is whenever you are building your images, we most of the time you will make use of a base image. You will define the base image. Okay, so to define your base image, we make use of the from instruction. Okay, so once the base image has been defined, the next thing we looked at was your ARG instruction. Now ARG instruction can be used when you want to define any of your variables. Okay, so ARG is the only instruction that can come before the from instruction. So ideally, your Docker file should start off with the from instruction. Now, the only instruction that you can pass before the from instruction is your ARG instruction. So ARG instruction is simply used to define your variables. Any variables you want to define, you can define that. Then we discussed about your label. Label is used to define your metadata. Any metadata that you want to pass. It could be your author name. It could be your version. It could be your description. Whatever metadata you want to pass, you can pass that by making use of your label instruction. Then we discussed about your run command. Now, at any point, if you want to execute any commands on the base image, like you want to install some packages, you want to create some files, you want to create some folders, you want to update the machine. So any instructions you want to pass, you can pass that by making use of your run instruction. Then we also discussed about your CMD instruction. Now, your CMD instruction as well as your run instruction both are used to run the commands. The difference would be when these commands are going to be executed. So it's a very common interview question. What is the difference between run and CMD? So the run instruction gets executed when you build the image. All right. So whenever you are building the image, that is when your run instruction gets executed, and your CMD instruction gets executed when you run that image as a container. Okay. So whenever you start that image as a container, you your CMD instruction gets executed. Right. Then we also discussed about your expose. Now, at any point, depending on the application that you're running, if you want to specify the port number to be used for that particular application, you can define that by making use of your expose instruction. Okay, so that is where we had stopped in the last session. So, any questions, any queries, please let me know.
No, Rabbi, not for mine.
Bharat?
No, sir, all clear.
Okay, cool. Just give me one moment. So next, what we will do is now we will try building this image. Okay, so let's try creating an image, and then we'll also start a container out of it, and let's try validating all the instructions that we have given. Let's start validating that and see whether it has everything or not. Okay, so just give me 1 minute, and I'll share my screen. And okay, I'm sharing my screen. Let me know if you're not able to see. So, okay. So how do you build your images? So at any point, if you want to build your image, this is the command we use, the Docker image build command. Okay, so this is the syntax: Docker image build -t, which stands for tag, and then the name of the image. So what name you want to give to that image, we can define that by making use of this -t flag. And then we have this dot over here. Now dot is used to specify the location where your Docker file is present. Okay, so here in my case, I'm giving dot. That means my Docker file is present in the current location. Okay, so let me log into my server over here. It's the server. Give me 1 minute. So this is this server. Let me quickly log into this. So in the last session, we created a Docker file. This is what we have created. So out of this, if you look at current images, this is all we have. Okay. And now we are going to create our own custom image. So for that, we will use this command: Docker image build -t, which is used to give a name to your image. Like this, if you want to give a name to your image, we can make use of your -t flag. And then whatever name you want. So let's call this as custom image. Let's set this as version 1.0. Okay, so this tag that you see here, this version, if you want to set that, we can make use of this. Now, if you don't give anything, by default, it will set it to latest. Okay, and then the location where Docker file is present. So in my case, the Docker file is present in the current location, so I'll simply use dot. If the Docker file was present in a different location, you will need to give that path, right? Once you're done giving this, just hit enter. And what your Docker will do is Docker will start reading the instructions that you have in this Docker file. Okay, whatever the instructions you have, it will start reading those instructions and it will start creating your custom image by executing those instructions one after the other. Okay, so here it will tell you, how many instructions you have within your Docker file. Okay, so let's wait for this to complete. Okay, so now here if you see step, so I have total 9 steps. Okay, so 1 of 9, 2 of 9, 3 of 9. So they start executing the instructions one after the other. So that's my ARG instruction, then the from instruction, label instruction. Then I have the apt update. So this is all the update execution. And then, okay, so I'm getting an error over here. So if you see no space left on device. So basically the server that I'm using, it does not have enough space. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete some of these things. So let me delete that. This. Um, uh, just cleaning up because I don't have enough space. So, I guess that's all. Let's try this build instruction once again. Okay, so now you can see it went ahead. And then it went to, so it came to the seventh step, which is to install Git, install Java, install Apache 2. So all these that you see over here, this is executing those instructions for us. Okay, so whatever the instructions you have given, it will start executing those instructions for us. And then it will create the image. If all the steps are successful, it will go ahead and create an image for us. Does it make sense? Any questions until here?
No, Ravi.
No,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. While we wait for that, give me one moment. Okay. So now here you can see the image is successfully built. So 8 of 9, 9 of 9, and here you can see successfully built. That's the image ID. This is something that is assigned by Docker. You don't have to worry about that. And then here is the image that we have tagged. Okay, so basically the image is successfully created. So now, if we look at this Docker images, I should be able to see my image. Okay, so you can see the name, the tag, image ID, when this was created, and what is the total size of it. Okay, this is how you create your custom images. So at any point you want to build your custom images, this is how we do it. Okay, so we simply create your Docker file. We give all the instructions that you want. It's not necessary that you have to give all the instructions. Based on your requirement, based on your use case, you can specify what all instructions you want. And then when you do the Docker build, it will start executing those instructions one by one and create the custom image for you. Now, let's start a container out of this. Okay, so I'll use this image and I'll say Docker run -dit, and then I'll do the port mapping. Now, remember in this Docker file, we have done an expose, right? So basically, I'm telling my Docker that, hey, when I'm accessing this application, I want you to listen on this port number. Okay, so now that is one part. You also need to do the port mapping on your host machine. So this one, you see, this is the port number that we have exposed, and this is your host machine. So see, this one, it's a process. It's a isolated process that we have created. So first, from the internet, we need to hit our host machine. And when we hit the host machine, your host machine will understand that it has to redirect the traffic to this port number, which will hit your container. So we need to do this port mapping. And then finally the image. And this, okay, sorry. Now, here if you see, when I run this command, by default, it will look for your latest tag. And here if you see, I don't have an image with the latest tag. So I have to explicitly specify the version as well. And this will error response port. Okay, so I'm getting an error over here telling that the port is already taken. So on my local machine, it is telling me that the port is already taken. Let me check that. So if you want to check what all port numbers that are running on your local machine, this is for your Linux machine, we can make use of this netstat command. Okay, so let me show that. So netstat, it's a Linux tool which can be used to see the port numbers that are running on your machine. So here currently, these are all the port numbers that are running. So here if you see this 80, okay, so my Docker proxy is using the port number 80. So I cannot use that. I'll have to use a different port number. Okay, so that's okay. We will use a different port. The expose port number should be the same. The host machine port number is what we are going to change. So let me make it as 81. And now you see it was able to start the container for me. And it has exited. Here you can see exited, and that's the return code. So we'll have to look at the logs to see why it exited. So we'll say Docker logs and the container ID okay, so it is complaining about some variable not defined, and there's an error. So you can see syntax error on line. So it is complaining about something. So the image that we have used, not the image, rather the Apache server that we have installed, it is complaining about that. But you get the idea, right? So that's basically what your Docker file is. You use a Docker file to build your own custom images. Whatever customization you want to do, you can do that and build your own custom images. Does that make sense?
Got it, Ravi.
Yes, sir.
The next instruction that we are going to look at is from ARG label run cmd and export. Okay, so the next instruction we're going to look at is your env. Now, env is another way that you can set your variable. So there are two ways that you can set your variables. Okay, so one is by using the ARG instruction and also the env instruction. Okay, both can be used to set your variables. Now, what's the difference between them? With your ARG instruction, this is your dynamic variables. This is your static variables. Okay, so with this, the variable name and the value will be defined in the Docker file. Okay, when you're creating the Docker file, you'll be defining the variable name as well as the value within the Docker file itself. But your ARG is dynamic. What that means is you can override or you can pass the values outside the Docker file. So you can change it at any point you want. Okay, it is not static. So For now, we will look at your env. ARG, I'll talk more on that later on. So here we can use the env instruction, and then your variable names and the values that you want to pass, whatever the variable name and the value that you want to pass, you can pass. So the env instruction sets the environment variables to the value, and this value will be in the environment for all subsequent instructions in the Docker file. And you can define the env instructions in two forms. So you can either say env space variable name space variable value. That's one way. The other way is env space variable name equals to variable value. Now the difference between these two is that if you're going with the first form, you can declare only one variable with the env instruction. With the second form, you can declare multiple variables in the same env instruction. Okay, that's the difference you have. So something like this. So now let's say here, if you see, we have hard coded these values, right? So we can make use of your variables now for that. So see, instructions, you can pass them anywhere you want. Okay, it need not be in the order that I am writing. You can pass them in any order you want. So let's say env, and let's call this as package one, and let's set this to git. Likewise, let's say package 2 equal to default -jdk. Then let's say package 3 equals to Apache, to like this. You can define your variables. And then you can start calling those variables within your Docker file by using the variable names. So here, let's say dollar flower brackets, and within the bracket the variable name. So in my case, this will be package 1. Okay, that's how we call the variables. Okay. Likewise here we will say package 2. Likewise here we will say package 3, like this. If you want to define the variables, we can make use of your env instructions. Next, we have the add instruction. Now, add instruction can be used if you want to copy some files to your container. So again, there are two ways that you can copy the files. One is by using the add instruction, and then you have the copy instruction. Now, add is used to copy static and dynamic files. Copy is used to copy static files only from local machine. This will be from local and remote machine. Meaning, with your add instruction, we can copy the files from your local machine to the container machine. We can also copy the files from a remote machine, like a URL. You can give the URL, and your Docker will go to that URL, download the file from there, and copy it to your container. So it's dynamic. Whereas your copy, it is only copying the files from your local machine. Okay, it is not dynamic. You cannot give a URL, that will not work. Does this make sense?
Yeah, understood, Babu.
Okay. So sure, let's say we will use add. So this is how the syntax would be. So the add instruction copies new files, directories, or remote file URLs. So you can give those remote URLs as well from source, and adds them to the file system of the image at the path of the destination. So basically copying the files to the container. So add supports multiple source resources. Add also supports use of wildcards in the source. So something like this. So you can give add your source and then the destination. So destination would be on your container, the path where you want to copy the files on your container machine. That will be your destination. Okay. So here, let's say, for example, I want to download Tomcat, okay, to the container machine. Maybe I'm doing something, and then I need this Tomcat. So I can get the URL. Okay, so I can copy this URL and I can give that instruction over here. And then I can pass the destination. So this will be my source. And then the destination. So here the destination would be on the container machine. Which path do you want to copy that? So let's say I want to copy that to the temp folder, just for the sake of example. So this becomes your add instruction. Likewise, we have your copy instruction. Now, copy can be used whenever you want to copy any files. Let's say, for example, on your local machine, you have some files. So let's say this index.html file. Okay, so this is empty, right? So let me add something. So this file was created on the local and copied over to the container machine. Let me put this. Yes, I'll save this. Now let's say I want to copy this file to my container machine. That's where we can make use of your copy instruction. So copy the source. So dot slash, that means in the current path, right? So this is the source and then the destination. So let's say I want to copy it to this path in my destination. So I have to make sure that all these destination paths are available. And if not, then again, it will fail with the error telling that unable to find the destination path. So this becomes my copy instruction. The copy instruction copies new files or directories from source and adds them to the file system of the container at the destination path. You can specify multiple source resources to copy the files and also supports wildcards in the source. So something like this. Questions?
No, Ravi.
No, sir.
Cool. So let's build this, okay? And we'll look at before that. Let me comment to this because I don't want to start the process because there's an error with the Apache. So just to override that. So we'll build this Docker image build -t, and let's call this as custom image, and this will be version 2.0 and then dot Docker image build. Sorry, should be -t. So now this will start building the instructions for us. So let's wait. Okay, so we have that. Okay, so my image is done. So now, if you see, we should be having two images, two different images. One is version 1.0 and then the other we have is version 2.0. Let's see, that's version 1.0 and then that's version 2.0. Also, you can see the difference in the size. So that means here we have some additional things. Now let me start a container out of this. So Docker run -bit I won't do the port mapping because for now I won't be accessing this application, so that's fine. And this should start a new container for me. So here you can see up since 1 second, and there's the image. Let's connect to this, the Docker exec. Before I do that, this is the instruction that we currently have in this Docker file. So now let's connect to this. Come inside the container. Now I want to validate these things, right? So if I go to this destination path, cd/temp, where you can see there's my Apache that is downloaded. And now if I go to this destination path where www.html, there's the index.html file. And if I look at this data, you can see that's your add and copy. Questions?
So even if you're using the Windows
No.
version of the container, so like, do you have to run through the commands, or like, is it possible via GUI?
So you have GUIs available, but my suggestion would be to stick to the command line. It helps to understand the things easily, and you'll understand, the concept would be much easier working with the command line.
Okay.
Cool. The next instruction we have is your entry point. Now, entry point is your same as your CMD instruction. Again, very common interview question you can expect is, what's the difference between CMD and entry point? Now, both are instruction that gets executed when you run the container. Okay, so this also gets executed when you run the container. This also gets executed when you run the container. The difference would be that these instructions, you can override the commands. Entry point cannot override the commands. The other difference is CMD can be used as arguments for entry point. So adding additional instructions and all those things, you can do that by making use of your CMD instruction. For example, this, okay, let me exit from here. This Docker file that we have, now here if you see this CMD, I have passed this, right? Now what I can do is I can break this into two different commands. So here I can use entry point, and then I can pass this. And in the CMD, I will only pass these instructions. So the Docker will understand that when I'm executing these commands, it has to use these as arguments. So now the same thing, but we have broken it down into two different commands. And also, when you're running this as a container, if you want to override this, if you want to change this, you can do that. But the entry point, we cannot change that. So both are used to execute your commands. So this instruction allows you to configure a container that will run as an executable. Both CMD and entry point instructions define what command gets executed when running a container, and Dockerfile should specify at least one of CMD or entry point commands. So it is generally recommended that you pass at least one of the commands, either the the CMD or the entry point. Questions?
No, Ravi.
Okay. The next instruction we have is your volume instruction. Now, by default, your containers are not persistent, meaning, let me show here. So let's connect to this container. So this is the container we have. Let me connect to this. Now, whatever the data that you will create, so let's say, for example, this file. Sorry. Let's say I'll add the additional data. Let's say this is a new change. I'll save and exit, and maybe I'll create one more file here called terraform.tf. So I made some changes, right? So here I have a file, and then the index.html file has been modified. Now I'll exit from here, and let's say the Docker was the container was deleted. So let's stop this, and I will remove it. Okay. Now, whatever the data I had on that is gone. So your containers are not persistent by default. The data on the container is available as long as the container is running. If you stop the container or if you delete the container, the data is gone. Now, if you want to make your data persistent, that's where we can make use of your volume instruction. So the volume instruction creates a mount point with the specified name and marks it as holding externally mounted volumes from native host or other containers. So, basically making your data persistent. So the value can be a JSON array. So you can say volume and then your path, or a plain string with multiple arguments such as this. So both are possible. So now let's say, for example, I want to make my, so let me start a new container again. So docker run -dit, and that's the image. I've started a new container. Now, okay, before that, I'll have to, define that in my Docker file. So let's say I want to make this persistent. So whatever the data we will have inside this Docker file, I want to make that persistent. So for that, I'll make use of the volume instruction. The volume var www.html. Now, whatever the data I will store in this file will be available on my local machine as well. So even if my container is deleted, the data, you can think of it as a backup. Okay, the backup will be available on my local machine. So that's where we can make use of the volume instruction to make your data persistent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, Ravi.
We'll talk about this on. Okay, I guess I'll stop here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, I have three, four instructions, which I'll do tomorrow, and that should complete your Docker file. And then we'll start off with other topics. Cool. Okay, so we'll again build this tomorrow. We'll talk about the other instructions as well. And yeah, I think that's all for today. We'll continue tomorrow.
Okay, Ravi. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir. Thank you.